All right. Okay. So now Docker is, we just went to the Docker, the one component. Docker has another component called the Docker Compose. So Docker Compose is, you see this, the way picture, but let's go a little bit details. Docker Compose, the file extension is YAML, yet another markup language, okay? Docker file is Docker file. It's a Docker file format. The Docker Compose is YAML. So what is Docker Compose? Docker Compose is a tool that allows you to define a multi-container. So purpose of this, multi-container. So in this case, front and back end. In the microservices, there is that 8 services, including the front end. So instead of you running the 8 services, again, understand this part is good one. So in this case, what are you doing? Our front and back end, we are going to create a Docker Compose file. It is a YAML format. We are going to explain all the details and it will just run. So front and back end, they are not running separated. We are running 2 Docker files through the Docker Compose. Good. They are good. But the best one is you have the environment where you don't need a lot of people, right? 100 people, couple hundred people. You don't need the Docker Swarm, really. You don't need the Kubernetes cluster. You don't need it, right? You are just trying it out, right? Or two developer is working on the 3 microservices, and the developer is working 2 microservices, right? One, the microservices are actually hosted in a different developer computer and all the good thing. How to run all of this? So you can use a Docker Compose. Means all the services is a Docker file, and you're actually in the Compose file, you are just connecting them. You're just explaining them, okay, run this. And once you run it, it will be running the both without any problem. You can run the microservices, like the 6 services, and you can actually run that through the Docker Compose. Because this is only for the small, like the environment, the less traffic environment, and the small group of people environment, developer environment. This is all benefits. Benefits is multi-containers you can run through the Docker Compose. Docker Compose is to simplify the process of managing multi-container Docker application, where Docker Compose is commonly used in development environment. You see this, as I said, testing environment, as I said, or deploying application to production. When is Docker Compose used? Docker Compose is used when you have multiple Docker container. Means Docker front end is a container, back end is a container, right? Or your, like the microservices user authentication container, one container, the user, the chat container, and the content container, and then the enrollment container is all the microservices, right? What is the advantage of Docker Compose? Advantage of Docker Compose is that it allows you to define your application environment in a single file. That's the advantage, making it easy to share and replicate, which is true. You will say. What is disadvantage of Docker Compose? One disadvantage of Docker Compose is that it can be complex to set up and configure more complex application. And of course, for the production grade, people don't use it. It is because these are the good use cases. You do not go to the complex, where there is a lot of traffic, you do not use this solution at all. But the main purpose is managing multi-container from a single file is called the Docker Compose.yaml. How to use Docker Compose file is a YAML version number, services, web, image, port number, and this. That's the one. Another is DB, images, environment, and stuff. What is all of this? Images, like you made it, right? Remember, you made the front-end images. Images, you made it, like a back-end images. Port number, you saw it. Remember, the post port, the host port, and the Docker port. That's the one. And environment, you will learn more details. And the DB, you're just passing the DB credential. So here, DB, we do not run the database in a Compose or this way, but in a small environment for the developer, they do everything because to work. They do not wait for the DevOps engineer to give them the database access, this and that. They can create entire. the entire platform into their own environment. This is the reason we appreciate, a manager appreciate when a developer knows this kind of things. Are they difficult? They are not. Are they easy? They're super easy. If as long as you have a learning mindset, DevOps engineer will set up everything for you. Why? Because down the path, he will look at this and he knows everything, because this file is helping him what to do next. But if you say you do not want to learn it, it is too difficult for you, then of course, we are all in the manual garbage. Okay, we are all in the manual process. Things is over complex. We are thinking and taking long time to use. And the build takes long time, deployment takes long time. Of course, QA takes get the application at the very end, and we are not able to ensure the quality because we are not implementing and improving the process and procedure to take advantage from this type of tools. The Docker Compose is very good one to actually do the multi-container run, microservices run, and in small development and test environment to make our life much easier. What it does basically the multi-container configuration, basically put it in the Docker Compose file, and you actually done it, you run it, and it works. If you get any issues, you go to the ChatGPT, it will fix any indentation. What is the Docker Compose use? It's used the format called the YAML. I think it can use the JSON, but the YAML is more the popular, the file extension than the JSON when it comes to the Docker Compose, Docker Swarm, and the Kubernetes. All right, let's go here. So Docker Compose is a tool, as we said, it defines the services, and we saw that build and start container, manage the application, iterate and update, scale the services. That's the life cycle. So that's your file, then you build. Like the same way, Docker file is a Docker Compose. Then you build and you start. Then you manage the application. Application is running, the QA or the other people are able to access it. If it is not working, you have to come and start, stop and start again. These things. Iterate and update means again developer is updating the new. You have to build the Docker file and you have to run the Docker Compose. You don't need to come here. If the developer actually make the new code, you need to build the Docker file, not the Docker Compose, unless you need to make the changes. The port number changes, this and that, or you are updating the new container. Other than that, once you make Docker Compose file one time, you know there is no changes. You don't need to do anything else. Developer changes, you have to actually build the Docker file because Docker file is built based on the raw code. Raw code is coming from the GitHub. So you have to know all of this very clearly. There is no way you can memorize anything else. If you try to memorize, things will not work. Things will be like the garbage on your head. And you will be thinking over complex that what is going on. But they're all very straightforward process. And then of course the Docker Swarm will be coming into the action. Docker Swarm is actually the running many containers. So that's actually the little like the brother of like a Kubernetes. We're not going to cover this. It will be another session, then we'll cover. So basically, remember, whenever you see the cluster means many computers work together, do the same thing. What is the same thing? Because they are getting hit by the clients. In this case, the traffic. Tens of million people are using someone is posting something, people is uploading something, someone is chatting on the Facebook, someone is adding somebody else, someone is actually running the ad, someone is deleting the ad. Tens of million of people work in tens of things. One computer cannot do any of this. In this case, you need a cluster. Cluster means the many computers work together and they are actually with the load balancer approach. Load balancer approach means all the requests will be handled by the Swarm, and Swarm will be actually giving the resources, the request to the specific services or the resources. And the resource has nothing but your front end, the container or the back end container. Okay, if you have like hundreds of the container here, right? Each of the container is managed by the Docker Swarm. What does it do? Well, I have a microservice. It's called the chat. People is using the chat all day. I am giving the chat 15 container. I have a services called the content upload. People is using 1 or 2 times. I'm going to giving the 2 container. I have a service, it's called the video upload. All day video upload is happening. We are going to give the 30 container because people is using it. I have a container called the people sign up, but only 5,000 people sign up. We need the 5 container. I'm giving the 5 container here. So you have hundreds of container is here. Master is Docker Swarm. Swarm is making the decision. How make a decision? Because you know it. Who you? DevOps engineer. How you know this? Because you know from the business. How you know from the business? Because you have a monitoring system. In the monitoring system, you see it. What is actually user is doing. You can see lots of user is chatting all day. No way the chat service should be slow. No way. It will be a big problem. Then user experience will be hampered. And you see, well, our sign up is very low, right? 2,000 people are signing up all day. We don't need the 10 container there. We can just give the 5 container there. This all benefits is providing by the cluster. It's a cluster. This is the whole thing is called the cluster. It's called the Docker Swarm cluster. What is the purpose? Purpose is it is actually the managing all the containers and giving them the workload, removing the workload, managing the workload, deleting them, updating creating the new container. It all done by the cluster. So it is the Docker Swarm cluster. It is also used in a small environment. Swarm is a container orchestration tool, allows users to manage a cluster of Docker nodes. Actually, it is a computer and it is a container. Computer, remember, you have an EC2 machine. And the moment you install the Docker, that is actually the Docker node. It is a Docker machine, the EC2, the moment you install the Docker, it become a Docker node. They all will be joining here. So that is the technical part, don't worry about it. But once you get it, what do? It's a container. How the container come? You build the Docker file. Once you build it, once it run, it become a container. A container is a jar, right? It has the whole thing. Okay. Why Docker Swarm is used? Docker Swarm is used to simplify the deployment and management of containerized applications across multiple hosts. Same application can be run on all the nodes without any problem because they are managed by their manager is Docker Swarm. What is Docker Swarm is used? When is requirement high availability, load balancing, and scaling container application, as I said. And what is the advantage of Docker Swarm? They provide automated load balancing. I said it. Automated load balancing. It knows. It knows when this node is down. Immediately run this here. It knows when this node is unavailable. Immediately knows it provide the resource here, balancing here. Immediately create another node. So that's the master. In the Kubernetes, it's called the master. In the Docker, it's called the swarm. Swarm is like the pig, right? You guys already know this. So pig eats a lot. Pig is powerful. People knows it. So Docker is called the swarm. Kubernetes is called the cluster, but Kubernetes is called the master. Okay. Disadvantage, of course, it is not like a million of things you can do. It is small. Okay. It may not be feature rich or flexible as other container orchestration tools like Kubernetes. That's the reason I mentioned Kubernetes. So it is again a smaller environment. You have a 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. You can run the swarm cluster. You have a million of users. You cannot run the swarm cluster. As a DevOps engineer, you make the decision. How you make the decision? You need to know application. How you need to know application? You need to know who is the users and the forecasting. Forecasting means how many millions of users on this application is. We do not ask the question just for a reason. When you manage the swarm, when you manage the Kubernetes, it is actually you're actually the questions. I want to know if you know the business. If you really have the visibility of the entire application, that's the reason you ask this question. Okay. How to use the Docker Swarm and give example. Okay, we will be doing this manually in the hands-on, no problem here. Okay, the Docker Swarm is we will be installing this, initialize the swarm, add the nodes, deploy the services, manage services, monitor and manage it, deploy stack. We'll be doing all of this hands-on. So this is all the hands-on part. This is all the technical part. But my friend, if you do not understand this picture, then it's a problem. But if you do not understand what I said, then it's a problem. If you do not understand the Docker file, what the Docker file does, it's a problem. If you do not understand the manual deployment we did in the first hour, then you will not understand why we build a Docker file. So they all link with one another. But if you do not understand what is the application, well, sit down with the developer. If developer doesn't understand what is the application, the code purposes, sit down the product manager. And the product manager bring the requirement from the business. That's it. It is the magic, right? It is coming all the way there. It goes all the way to the production. So they have all interconnectivity. They're all dependent to one another. Make sure know each of these areas precisely, and your concept is very clear. We cover each of these dot by dot so that you never try to memorize any steps, because it is not going to work. Memorization will not work. Memorization will limit your ability to explain. Also, you will limit your ability to answer a follow-up question. That's the reason the content is given here. Each of the content you have to listen very carefully, and you have to what is called the connect all the dots in order to get the whole advantage. All right.